Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett, the astronaut of More Than Astrology, here to riddle the mysteries of eclipses, precession of the equinoxes, galactic alignment, and the turning of the ages. This is an astrological chart for Tuesday, March 8th, 2016, 5:36 p.m. in Kealakekua Bay, Hawaii, where I will be for this Pisces solar eclipse. This is a solar eclipse chart, and I know these things can be a little confusing, so let's bring this to an image we are a little bit more familiar with. This is also an image of the solar eclipse. This is a heliocentric or sun-centered image that comes from Solar System Scope, a brilliant software you can play with online for free. If I zoom in here a bit, you will see the moon just between Earth and Sun. That's a new moon, and that comes our way every month or month, but they're not always solar eclipses. So why will this one be? Well, that's what we're here to look into. But first, let's look at another image of the solar system. This is a geocentric or Earth-centered image of the solar system. Now I know the planets orbit the sun, not the Earth. I'm not one of those flat Earth guys, but from an astrological point of view, an energetic point of view, and even from our observational point of view, we do see the planets moving through our sky as if they are revolving around the Earth. And this helps decode the astrological chart. An astrological chart, for one, is a geocentric image of the planetary alignments at a time. It's Earth in the center. And if I insert that geocentric image into the center of this chart, you can see the planets aligning to their glyphs. This is Jupiter and its glyph. These are the glyphs for Mars and Saturn. Here's Mars and Saturn. Pluto, Venus, Mercury and Neptune, Sun and Moon together, the new moon, and Uranus. Here's a decoder ring for astrological glyphs if you want to take a screenshot of that and keep it on hand. Two of the glyphs that are shown on this ring are not shown in space, and they are these horseshoe-looking figures here. Some say this is the earphones and the upside-down earphones. What they are the north and south lunar nodes. Perhaps better said, ascending node and descending node. To see why, let's go back to space and then to Earth. We saw how an astrological chart, for one thing, is a representation of a geocentric image of the solar system at a given time. But to learn about the nodes, it's easier to look heliocentrically. If I tilt this on its side, you can see that for the most part the planets orbit in a relatively level plane. And this plane is called the ecliptic. If I extended this plane out into space, around the circumference you would find the constellations of the zodiac. Check out Pluto. This is one of the reasons why the astronomers demoted Pluto to dwarf planet status, because Pluto's orbit gets to relatively high and low declinations, meaning that Pluto gets far above the ecliptic plane, the plane of the solar system, or far below. And actually, in a theater called You, coming very soon, Pluto will be crossing the plane. This happens, Pluto descending from above the plane to below at Pluto's descending node. All of the planets have nodes. The moon orbits the Earth, not the sun. So the moon gets about 5 degrees above the ecliptic plane and 5 degrees below. That's not shown here. So to see that, we're going to have to look at another view. Not heliocentric, not geocentric, but from Earth. This is Stellarium, a brilliant astronomy program that you can download for free at stellarium.org. I highly recommend you do if you are learning the sky. It is available for Mac and PC and will cost you nothing. This is March 8th, 2016 in Kailua Kona, Hawaii, And this is an image of that solar eclipse. If I go back a day, this is just a sunset. All right, I can cruise forward some hours once the sun is setting. On March 8th, the moon comes to meet the sun, and it's that time of the solar eclipse. Now, in the software, I can bring forth the constellational lines and art. I can take away the atmosphere. I'm also going to add some markings here. First, let me set the horizon location to the ocean so we get a flat horizon. And I'm going to bring in the ecliptic, the horizon, and the meridian. Now, the ecliptic is the plane of our solar system because Earth is tilted in its orbit around the sun. The plane of the solar system is tilted in our sky. The summer constellations are higher, the winter constellations are lower. But this red line, this is the path of the sun, and for the most part the path of the planets because it's a relatively flat solar system, as we saw. The meridian is the line that runs exactly north-south. And these show up on the chart. So this is very important. Not only is the chart an image of a geocentric planetary alignment around the Earth, it's also an image of the planets in the sky from the Earth. You're standing here on Earth. Now, we're used to looking at maps as up is north and right is east, but that is not the case here. This is a map of the sky. So up is up, kind of. It's where the ecliptic, or the plane of the solar system, meets the south line, because in the northern hemisphere, the sun and the planets always travel in the southern sky. If you're above the Tropic of Cancer, that is. So the meridian is where the ecliptic meets south. On the astrological chart, we call that the midheaven, the top of the chart. So this is south and up. And if you're standing on Earth, looking south to see the ecliptic, the planets, then that makes left east and right west. This is the horizon. Everything below the horizontal line is in the southern hemisphere sky when we're looking at a chart for the northern hemisphere. So we know that as the Earth spins this way, planets and the stars and everything rises or ascends in the east. That's why this is the rising sign, or the ascendant. See, if I move through time, there's Jupiter rising. And this is the setting sign, or the descendant. If I move through time, here is the sun and the moon setting together. So what are these mysterious lunar nodes? Well, it's the place where the path of the moon, as seen from Earth, crosses the path of the sun, or the ecliptic, as seen from Earth. And that happens at the descending node once a month. I'll cruise by days. And then at the ascending node once a month. So the moon will reach the ascending node around March 21st. Ascending node, or north node, let's look at that in the sky. Moon and sun are together at the south node at the time of the eclipse, and that's why it is an eclipse. If we have a new moon and they're not at one of the nodes, then from Earth we see the moon above or below the sun, and therefore no eclipse. So I'm just going to move this through days, and actually I think I'll bring the atmosphere back, make this a little easier to see. We'll take some of the art out of there. So we're just looking at the moon here. See how it's below the ecliptic on March 11th, 2016. Later, and I need to move some hours so we can see this happening, later it's going to cross back over the ecliptic. This is March 21st, as we saw on the chart. And this is the ascending node, or the north node, because the moon is now moving from below the ecliptic and it's ascending over the ecliptic. When the moon is halfway between the nodes, that's when it's at its most extreme distance, which for the moon is 5 degrees above. This graphic shows the south node, or descending node, the place where the path of the moon from Earth's point of view descends from above to below the path of the sun, or the ecliptic, and the north lunar node, or ascending node, where it comes back up. When it is as far from the nodes as it can get, and that's square to the nodes, that's when we have maximum latitude for the moon, either below or above the ecliptic. I encourage you to check out your lunar latitude. It's a very interesting angle for astrological insight. Now, the closer a new moon is to either the descending node or the ascending node, the more total the eclipse will be. The same thing for a full moon, a lunar eclipse. A new moon is a solar eclipse, yeah? And the new moons have to occur within 11 degrees 38 minutes of either the descending or the ascending node for it to be a solar eclipse. The closer, the more total. And this one coming up will be a total solar eclipse because the Pisces new moon is so close to the descending node. It won't be seen everywhere on the globe. Where I live in Seattle, the new moon will align after the sun has already set. See, it's below the horizon. And that's why I'm going to Hawaii. It's still above the horizon. However, in Hawaii, we will not see a total solar eclipse. Because the Earth is a sphere, you have to be certain places on the globe for the moon to appear directly between the Earth and the sun to give you a total solar eclipse. Here's a graphic from timeanddate.com, and it shows you the path of this eclipse. The gray line is the eclipse's totality line. It's descending because the moon is descending across the line of the ecliptic. So as the Earth spins this way, it gets lower and lower and lower. Where I will be in Hawaii, we won't see a total solar eclipse represented by this gray line. We will see a partial solar eclipse. My teacher, Daniel Jamario, will be in Palu, Indonesia, here, where he will see an absolute total solar eclipse if the weather plays along. In Hawaii, below the path of totality, we'll see something more like this, which I love because this is the ancient symbol of the Vesica Pisces, formed by creating two circles of equal radius and centering them on each other's circumferences, one of the ancient symbols for the feminine for obvious reasons, a symbol from which comes many of the sacred numbers that are involved with the creation of the universe. Sacred geometry teaches us. Symbols shown throughout the world in religious iconography. Here's a symbol from Chartres Cathedral with Jesus sitting in the mandala or the vesica with the bowl of Taurus and the lion of Leo and the angel of Aquarius and the eagle of Scorpio. You can see that the Christian fish symbol comes from the Vesica Pisces, and so does the Pisces glyph. You simply flip the Vesica on the centers of the two circles to make Pisces. So I love that I'll be in Hawaii for this descending node Vesica Pisces eclipse in the sign of Pisces. Now, what about this being a descending node eclipse? How is that different than an ascending node eclipse? Well, we can look back to some more of the traditional names for these lunar nodes, the head of the dragon and the tail of the dragon. Why is that? Well, these headphones and upside down headphones, or horseshoe and upside down horseshoe, actually the one that's right side up is the south lunar node because it's the image on the back of the king cobra's head. So there's a lot of serpent symbolism with the nodes in the path of the moon. Why? Because the moon snakes above and below the ecliptic or the path of the sun every month. Here's an image from the Shamanic Astrology Divination card deck, which you can find at shamanicastrology.com, and you see the snake eating the moon here, lunar nodes and eclipses. Where does that come from? Well, in the Hindu tradition, where the north node is called Rahu, the head of the serpent, and the south node is called Ketu, the tail of the serpent, this comes from one of the great stories of old from the Mahabharata. It's the churning of the Milky Ocean, where the Devas, the heavenly gods, and the Asuras, the demons, got together to churn the Milky Ocean to create the Amrit, or the elixir of immortality. Once it was
created, Vishnu disguised himself as this beautiful enchantress Mohini and played this trick on the Asuras, where he only distributed this Amrit, this elixir of immortality, to the Devas. But one of the Asuras caught on to this. This was Rahu, and he snuck amongst the Devas so that he would serve the elixir. But right after he drank it, he was ratted out by his neighbors, Chandra and Surya, the moon and the sun, so Mohini cut his head off. But this was not until after he drank the elixir of immortality. So he was ever immortal, but now he had his head, Rahu, the head of the serpent, and his tail, Ketu, the tail of the serpent. And it's said that when solar eclipses align, this is Rahu eating the sun, or eating the moon, taking his revenge on Surya and Chandra. Well, it's a really interesting thing that Ketu, the tail of the serpent, can also eat the sun, as is the case for this solar eclipse at the south node, Ketu. This from Dane Rudhyar's How to Interpret the Lunar Nodes in a Birth Chart. He says, as the moon reaches its north node and enters the area of north latitude, it is as if it were opening itself to cosmic or spiritual influences symbolically represented by the North Pole, and more specifically the pole star. Thus, the North Lunar Node represents the point of intake of spiritual cosmic energies, and it was called the dragon's head, the nodal axis being symbolized by a dragon. The South Lunar Node was the dragon's tail. From a more strictly biological and functional point of view, the North Lunar Node refers to the mouth of an animal, and the South Lunar Node to the organs of evacuation, which means both the anus and the procreative organs from which the seed goes forth. So a South Lunar eclipse, or a South Solar eclipse this is like the evacuation, the release. We also want to look at the alignments astrologically. This South Node eclipse is right with Chiron, the great alchemical healing of the soul's wounds, the lead to the gold, the poison to the medicine. It's right opposite Jupiter, the conductor of the celestial symphony, our Dharma at the North Node, showing us the forward direction of our collective consciousness. It's squaring Saturn, and the square itself can be a rather Saturnian aspect. And here are all the alignments of all of the planets and many of the asteroids. Ceres, Divine Mother, Goddess of the Crop, will be very close to the solar eclipse as well. Here's another decoder ring for the glyph, so you can rewind, take a screenshot of the eclipse chart and a screenshot of this if you want to look at what all of the glyphs represent. One more thing about eclipses, they happen in cycles. This is called the Saros Cycle, which is 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So every 18 years, an eclipse repeats. Because of this 11-day part of the period, it's going to move about 11 degrees through the zodiac. The sun moves about 1 degree per day. Because of this 8 hours, it's going to shift a third of the way around the Earth's globe. 24 hours, or 3 in a series, will bring the eclipse back to where it was. So every 54 years, right, 3 times 18, the eclipse will be 33 degrees about further in the zodiac, so it will move an entire sign plus, and it will return back to the same time zones where it was. Moonblink.info is an incredible website for eclipse research and information. Once you get in here, the left tab will have an eclipse search window, and you can search the year of your birth, check out your prenatal eclipse. I'm going to look right now at 2016, and we'll see all of the eclipses this year, which will happen in Pisces and Virgo, because the nodes are now South Node Pisces, North Node Virgo. And here we'll zoom in on this March 9th, or really March 8th, 2016 eclipse. We saw that path before. But if I go back, we'll see that this is member to Saros Cycle 130. And this will show you all of the eclipses in the cycles. This is a cycle containing 73 eclipses over 1,298 years. Descending node eclipses start with a very partial eclipse around the south node, and then over time ascend and finish at the north pole, where they will become a ascending node eclipse, and that descends over time, about 1500 years, to the south pole. It goes back and forth like that. So many astrologers have shown that the eclipse cycle kind of carries energy of its first eclipse. This first one was in the year 1096, which was the year of the first Crusades. Many will look to where an eclipse first reached totality. 1475 was the first total eclipse in this particular cycle. Many will look very specifically at the time where what's called gamma is lowest, or when the eclipse is most directly aligned to the center of Earth, which isn't always in the center of the cycle. In fact, for this particular cycle, Saros Cycle 130, this is the one that most crosses the equator, or the center of Earth. So in some ideas, this is the one. Now, one more thing. See, it was 54 years, 3 cycles, when it gets back to a location where it last was. And that's bad English, but I think you know what I'm saying. See, 54 years before 2016, we see 1962. Okay, so between that time, it moved a third of the way around the globe, and then 18 years later, another third of the way around the globe, and 18 years later, it's back to where it was 54 years before. So check out how this 1962 eclipse crossed Indonesia, and so does this one, but from a much higher path, because the descending node eclipses that start at the South Pole ascend on the globe, bringing, in a sense, this solar eclipse energy, perhaps this Earth acupuncture energy, to different points on the globe. I'm not going to share too much about the solar eclipse now, because I just recorded a full interview about it with one of my teachers, Daniel Gemario, for our ongoing project, The Further Adventures of Shamanic Astrology, which will be posted very soon. But I would like to speak some about it. First of all, if you're on the big island of Hawaii on March 8th, come join us. I'll be hosting a free solar eclipse ceremony, which will basically be a meditation with some great sound healers, including Dave Hoover, who's an amazing harp player. And we'll be sitting and just seeding this eclipse with our intentions and prayers for it to perform beautiful earth acupuncture. An eclipse always is about the shadow. I mean, that's very clear. And when we look to the beginning of this cycle with the first Crusades and other eclipses in the cycle, there have been a lot of times when it aligned that brought some disruption, especially in the Mideast. And I think this is very important when we are looking to this idea of a south lunar node in Pisces. Now, when I continue this series and we talk about the precession of equinoxes, we'll see how we now are in this age of Pisces, transitioning into the age of Aquarius. So as the south nodes, which move in precession backwards through the zodiac or retrograde, as do the astrological ages, as the south node is now in Pisces, in general, we're here releasing some of the tension and shadow from the last 2016 years since we've been in this age of Pisces. This might be even more profound now because this south node eclipse is right with Chiron. One thing I would show is that the next in this cycle, right, it moves 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, so about 11 degrees. The next one will take it right to the equinox point. That will be March 20th, 2034, and it's going to move right through the Middle East, through Afghanistan, and Iran, and Kuwait, and Saudi, and down through Africa, as you can see. So the energy of this eclipse might culminate in ways at that time, and I feel that now it could be a beautiful thing for us to do individually to seed it with some of the Chironian energy. Chiron turning the medicine to the poison, addressing the soul wounds, the lead to the gold. And this doesn't happen by avoiding our shadow or avoiding the shadow of the world, but honoring it, seeing it, and moving forward. So as you heard from Dane Rajar's book about the nodes, there's a little bit of the excrement at the South Node, what we are releasing, and may we do that in a very profound way. Chiron will help out with that. Ceres, who in many ways is Divine Mother, is here in Pisces as well. So Ceres, when we're talking about a South Node in March, Mar, the sea, Mary, well, how has some of the victim nature and the martyrdom come into this project in this age of Pisces, this idea of selfless sacrifice is the only way to the heavens? And also, just how has the feminine Pisces, water, and the heart, water, been dishonored? How have we fallen for false beliefs, one of the shadow aspects of Pisces, in religiosity, and how has that led to religious wars? I mean, so profound with this particular Saros cycle that began with the First Crusade. Now, Jupiter is aligned to where we're looking, where we're heading. Yeah, at the North Node, the forward direction of collective consciousness, where the energy is coming in from. And Jupiter, in so many ways, is like Dharma. And he's in Virgo. He's saying, know your devotion, know your practice. And as Daniel and I speak about in this longer interview, bring ceremony to this, a ritualistic connection to this eclipse. And that doesn't have to be done according to some old book. What is magical for you? How can you celebrate this? How can you sit here and say, I purge, I release the old ways of belief that no longer serves, the old ways of victim and martyrdom that no longer serve. And I do this ceremoniously, and I do this to connect to my Virgo nature, my direct connection to spirit through the temple of my body. Saturn is in a very strong square, and so this makes what's called a T-square. And Saturn and Sagittarius in general, Saturn can be rough, but Saturn is also great wisdom, and Saturn is giving us the opportunity to rewrite our own rules, to release our old belief systems so that we can align ourselves to a higher vision, Sagittarius, to a vision-seeking Sagittarius, to a higher philosophy of truth, Sagittarius. And so there's some tension here in this square, and you see it's all opening up in these mutable signs to the one that's missing, which is Gemini. So let's remember to do this playfully, and to remember in some senses that the Earth game is just that. And when we play with a bright imagination, then we create. So may we seed this lunar eclipse with that energy and those prayers of playfulness and joy that will allow it to carry its shadow in this earth acupuncture across the globe and bring our energy and our own devotion to our release to the world at large. Finally, for those of you who cannot see the eclipse, like folks in Seattle, this is a Seattle chart, won't be able to, it's below the horizon, but Jupiter is in this perfect alignment. And Jupiter will have risen by the time it aligns. For folks in the West Coast, it's around 7:30 p.m. So Jupiter, who's reflecting the light of the sun, in a way is reflecting this eclipse to us. I mean, we all want to look to the light, and that's a beautiful thing, but there's something beautiful as well about turning our back to the sun, allowing it to warm us and shine through us. And when we turn our back to the sun, then we are forced to face our own shadow. So I would suggest one ceremony you could participate with is to, before the sun sets, honor it in the western sky, turn your back to it, really look at your shadow, look at where that's pointing. And as the sun sets, if you have a view of the eastern horizon, Jupiter will be rising, because on that very day, Jupiter reaches opposition to the sun, or vice versa, and that means that when the sun sets, Jupiter rises. And you can gaze at Jupiter, who, because he's in the middle of his retrograde, because he's opposite sun, will be as close to Earth as he gets, and therefore as bright as he gets, and you can see the sunlight reflected in Jupiter, unshadowed. and just call Jupiter in as a guide to lead your ceremonial process for releasing the old beliefs, for restructuring truth, for releasing victim nature, for releasing the suppression of the feminine energies, yeah? To really engage with this alchemical healing and head forward into a new way of your own direct connection to spirit. Jupiter, I have found, tends to respond profoundly to such intentions. So welcome Jupiter in as a teacher. In India, they call him Guru. And that's simply, I see you, I understand you're close, you're as bright as you get, and I understand you're bringing me into my direct connection. I invite you as a teacher, will you inform me as I walk on this sacred ground of Mother Gaia? May we always walk in such a sacred way. May we remember that when we bring the power of our creative imagination, especially in groups, in ceremonies, that we inform great mystery as much as great mystery informs us. May we remember that the revolution of self brings the greatest revolution to the world, to bring in a bright and more beautiful earth. May we remember that we came here to play the earth game, so why not play proudly? And may we remember always to honor ourselves for this tremendous growth that we have seen ourselves moving through in these years of dynamic shift. Love and planets to you. I will see you in space. This is your friendly astronaut, Gemini Brett, signing off.